severity comparable at best flu epidemic, the status quo was to change radically once with a fraudulent granting by the AFD of the emergency authorization for the product called Pfizer-BioNTech mRNA. It happened on December 11th, 2020. 2.5 years later, after the declassification of Pfizer documents, we learn a startling fact. The mRNA product distributed worldwide came from a manufacturing process 2, that went into production in October 2020, which is different from the process 1, process that produced the product presented to the committee in December 2020 with a claimed 95% efficiency. Process 2 had been tested on 252 subjects for whom no data is known. FDA and EMA were aware. Thus, 5.55 billion people, children, young people, adults, and elderly, were, without their knowledge and disguisefully forced, the guinea pigs of a genetic experiment that was to end in March 2023 for adults and in October 2024 for children. For such experiments, 47, we had the famous Nuremberg trial. The approval of the use of mRNA products in children in Europe did not raise any problem, EMA being funded 80% by the pharma industry. It is sad to note that in any medical decision, the deciding factor is money. In particular, for children, if the disease does not pose a risk, even the smallest risk related to vaccination should not be admitted, and the absence of the risks in children related to COVID-19 has been widely shown. In December 2020, for young people over 16, and in May 2021, for children aged 12-15, the slaughter of innocents began. FDA and EMA completed their action in June 2022 by including children under 5 in this experiment using a second bioweapon, messenger RNA trafficked in the lab, in order to induce the production of spike protein. This protein was modified as compared to that contained in SARS-CoV-2. It must be underlined that under no circumstance, in no form of life on Earth, naturally, there is an example of a healthy organism producing its own aggressors, against which it must also ensure defense. The serious side effects were not long in coming. Among the first alarms were those coming from Israel, from a group of 93 pediatricians who signaled in a statement to the Jerusalem Post a case of myocarditis in 3,000 to 5,000 inoculated, given that in 2020, in full epidemic, no increase in the incidence of myocarditis was noted. The declassification of Pfizer documents show that during the clinical trials, the incidence of cardiac death was 3.7 times higher in the group injected with mRNA as compared to the control group. Heart attacks increased exponentially with the number of doses administered. Post-injection myocarditis are different through their symptomatology, and they are different from viral infection, and they are often the cause of sudden deaths in adolescents and young adults. Average heart disease rate of 0.0061% in the age group between 12 and 17 years old. The political and medical propaganda, doubled by the media, continued, and supports continuing and intensifying the vaccination of children. Important medical publications signals and report the increase in the risk 133-fold for post-injection myocarditis in children of age 12 to 15. There are warnings about turbo cancers that can involve any organ or tissue. The autoimmune diseases, neurological diseases, and affection of any part of the body, both mRNA product and its effect, the spike protein, can circulate throughout the body. There is no barrier they cannot cross, and the damage is unpredictable. Everything was ignored or passed off as fake news by those who planned and executed this. The injection of mRNA products was only one step. Others are already planned. Anything can be covered up. Anything can be twisted or hidden, but they can't manipulate two things: births and mortality. In all heavily injected countries, the birth rates has fallen by 10% or more. In the same countries and without exception, the excess mortality compared to the 5 years preceding the COVID-19 increased to very worrying levels. Altering death certificates to hide the underlying cause was practiced in America and everywhere else. In Europe, and not only, since 2021, there have been more infant deaths in newborns, school children, teenagers, and young people. The figures are shocking and demand justice. Denmark and Great Britain are suppressing since August-September 2022 the administration of these products in children between 5 and 11 years old after the increase with 20% in mortality in just 5 months of use. Other countries, Romania included, are looking in different ways to introduce them into the vaccination calendar and make them mandatory. The introduction of the COVID vaccine causes in Europe an increase of 17 times in infant mortality. The data analysis from Israel reveals that immunization with Pfizer increased mortality rate in young people 260 times compared to SARS-CoV-2 infection. Let's not forget that in Romania, possibly in other countries, political figures, university medical figures, as well as the pediatric society, deceived children to allow themselves to be injected so that they could enjoy the freedom of hugging their family and friends, to be able to go on vacation or to the mall to eat ice cream, and more importantly, to protect their grandparents. It was a long period when the stupidity of in the immense unknown before us, one thing needs to be clarified. In South America, as in Australia and Europe, The microscopic study of genetic products administered to the population has revealed surprising images. The creation of networks with geometric contours that change and reorganize according to the environment. In the electromagnetic environment, the structure is denser. The microscopic preparation does not dry out. It lasts for 2 years already without degrading. The network covers the entire field of view and behaves differently in the presence of blood samples. It is a situation that urgently needs to be clarified. The images shown are made in Romania. This is the image produced by Comernati in the presence of the blood sample. The competing authorities strangely do not deal with these aspects signaled the way they didn't do anything when the presence in the vials of two components, ARC 315 and ARC 115, was found, destined to research only, never used in veterinary or human medicine. A few official charts were exposed that show the catastrophe of children injection, the explosive increase in cancers in children. This increase continues year by year, and more child deaths are reported. The mortality boom in Europe between 0 and 14 years old as of May 2021, December 2022 is shown here on this slide. Apart from all the disasters already recorded, the most destructive is the damage of the human genome by in vitro experiment through on the liver cell. The lie sits with the king at the table. The king today is called Fauci, Pfizer, FDA, CDC, WHO, von der Leyen, EMA, ECDC, the government, the Minister of Health, with all their minions. The World Economic Forum has a very special role. It is the duty of doctors to come forward and tell people, you have been lied that this was a pandemic with a natural and killer virus. You have been lied to that there is no alternative treatment. You have been lied to that you were getting a new safe and effective vaccine. It's not new. It comes after a 20-year history of failure. It's dangerous and ineffective. It doesn't protect you from infection, it doesn't protect you from hospitalization, and it doesn't protect your life. You have been lied to that phase 3 is finished. You have been lied to that it stays at the injection site and degrades in a short time. You have been lied that you will only receive 2 doses. In Romania, there were university enlightened heads who wanted to withdraw the right to practice medicine or harassed the doctors who uncovered the COVID-19 scam and misinformed the people. Physicians have the ethical right and duty to protect patients and the public from the wave of mRNA products that is preparing to replace all classical vaccines that have proven their validity and effectiveness. In the last few years, we have witnessed the sacred union of incompetence with arrogance. If in September 2021, the first COVID-19 summit in Rome, analyzing the medical attitude of the officials, concluded crime against humanity, today we have all reasons to state that a crime against the human species is being committed. Thank you for my attendance, for your attention, and my attendance here comes with the publishing of the second edition of the following book. Well, the royalties will be donated to a foundation who cares for vulnerable children. I hope that this book reaches you and reaches more and more people that should understand what has happened in Romania in the past 3 years. It is a way to resist firmly, without hesitation, against what world's officials, medical and political officials want to do to us. God help us. Thank you very much for your attention.
Good evening, I'm Rain Trozy. 3 years ago, COVID mandates came into effect around the world. Lockdowns, mask wearing, social distancing, and the movement to online work and education changed our lives suddenly and dramatically. This was especially difficult for the youth, those of us working hard to start a career and navigate the life ahead. It was in the middle of the COVID era that I began building what has grown into an international youth community. It's called Over to the Youth. I saw an unmet need among youth who were isolated by COVID mandates and in many cases ostracized by both family and community because of COVID-related social division. Through this service, I've been humbled by the complexity of the challenge of inspiring, uniting, and raising the consciousness of today's youth. This challenge has always begun with the man in the mirror. Along the way, I've been relentlessly inspired by the authenticity and outgoing nature of my newfound friends. Members of Over to the Youth have courageously offered their personal stories to this summit, and I stand before you as a messenger on their behalf. These COVID stories are extremely personal, and their authors in many ways had to re-experience their COVID-19 traumas to share them with us today. I hope their testimonies provide you with context of the lived experience of this demographic and helps us to acknowledge the real-world effect of the overwhelming evidence and data presented by the other speakers today. I don't approach you with any intentions of changing your mind on any matter, but I hope that what we have prepared for you is both thought-provoking and inspiring. With that, I'm in, and I'll begin to share the COVID-era stories of various members of Over to the Youth. Thank you. The first member decided to submit her story under the alias of Joanna. Joanna is from Quebec, Canada, and she was 18 years old at the time. In January 2020, I was on vacation in Cuba. I had just turned 18 and was celebrating reaching adulthood. On a rainy evening, me and my family saw a news report about COVID-19 on the television. We changed channels, but it did. When we returned to Canada, a lot had changed. Office jobs became remote, education was online, and many events were canceled or postponed. It was all new to me, and I didn't know what would happen next. I heard about this deadly virus that was present in my country. I remember being surprised by how quickly it spread. I began seeing people get sick, and then lockdowns happened. Times were hard. I couldn't see my friends or my peers. My classes were online, and it was difficult to reach my teachers for help. This was a new environment that I had to learn to navigate. Months went by. More mandates were implemented. I had to wear a mask in public spaces and keep 6 feet apart from others. I thought that these restrictions were keeping people safe, but the news reported that more people were getting sick, and vaccines were rolled out. I was about to begin a new job as a summer camp counselor, and since I was working with children, vaccination was required. So I did. I didn't take into consideration that it could negatively impact my health. As I walked into the vaccination clinic, the nurse handed me a consent form. After signing it, I was called in to receive my first dose. I was reassured by the nurse and then injected. My heart was racing and I felt a sharp stinging pain in my chest. The following months were very difficult. At random moments, my heart began beating very fast. I called an ambulance because I had trouble breathing. They gave me an oxygen mask and told me that it was just anxiety. I also struggled with my period. Reflecting on these difficult times in my life, I am grateful for those who stepped in and helped me, because I don't know if I would still be here without them. Thank you. The next testimony comes from Tom from the United Kingdom. He was 19 years old at the time. I was a first-year dental student when policies around COVID began to emerge. As a teenager, I struggled with my mental health and feelings of disconnection from my peers. At university, I found more meaningful friendships, but the contradictions in the way the UK was handling COVID were of no concern to anyone else. Driven apart from others physically and ideologically, I felt scared, depressed, and alone. Many times, I left the house late at night to sit on a bridge with a cable tied in a noose around my neck, mustering the courage to step into the void and end it all. On one occasion I did, but I survived. Most often though, I laid still, defeated by a world that had no place for me. One night during lockdown prior to the jab rollout, my then girlfriend suffered repeated seizures for the first time in her life. The ambulance took her away in the early hours of the morning without me to maintain social distancing. I waited in the car park, forbidden from entering the hospital to see her. She finally emerged alone, jacketless, floating expressionlessly in the cold night towards my car. We cried into each other's arms long after the sun had finished rising. The mental toll of the COVID mandates is a big reason we are no longer together. It took me time to find peers that could relate to such horrors. One girl in my university told me of breaking lockdown rules to visit another girl in her hall of residence. She was concerned about her well-being, and rightly so. She found her overdosed from drugs in her room. She saved her life, but the university swore her into secrecy to cover up her breaking the lockdown rules. A course mate of mine had watched her best friend's health deteriorate immediately following the first dose of AstraZeneca. He died of a brain hemorrhage at the end of a week of shakes and fevers. They refused an autopsy because he was being donated for medical research. Another friend told me that her father had pressured her into getting the same jab that had killed her mother so that she could continue her nursing career. To avoid the same fate for myself, I told my family that the risks of these jabs outweighed the benefits, and I was ostracized and called stupid for my decision. We still do not talk about the matter to this day. Thank you, Tom. Not how I left it. Desiring the high school experience, I applied and was accepted into a boarding school in British Columbia, going on to complete grade 11. Having been remiss for so long, I truly enjoyed my friends and sports. My school was the only Canadian school to last the year without a lockdown, but staying open came at a price. Every student and staff had to wear a mask at all times and stick to pre-selected cohorts. We could not interact with other cohorts. If a student got sick, they were taken away, tested, and enclosed in a windowless box for 3 days. The school had converted a gymnasium into a quarantine facility in which admitted students were not allowed to leave, see sunlight, or other people until released. I was tested positive, put through this, and it was an extremely isolating and demoralizing experience. Nevertheless, I was excited to finish high school, but as summer of 2021 approached, talk of COVID vaccines arose. At the end of the school year, there was an injection station placed inside the school, and students were called to take the vaccine without their parents present. I was spared, but most of my peers were not. Returning home to my family, I learned that my mom, under the stress and isolation of the lockdowns, had developed breast cancer. The summer was filled with surgeries and discord. My school then informed me that I could not return for my last year unvaccinated. I did not trust the safety of the vaccine, and I did not take it. I was thus barred from attending my final year, so I quietly graduated online, again remiss of the friendships and sports I had so briefly enjoyed. After graduation, I was accepted to numerous prestigious Canadian universities, but I could not go because the vaccine mandates prohibited me from going. Instead, I chose an online university to start the process of attaining a degree in accounting. COVID responses in Canada and around the world have personified my biggest fears and denied me the university experience I dreamed of. I truly hope we can see our mistakes from a place of love, enact change, and once again prosper. Thank you, Sophia. Harvey, 21 years old at the time, is from the United Kingdom. During the pandemic, it was hard to fly to and from university. Although the vaccine was not a requirement for air travel, it was presented as mandatory. With long quarantine periods up to 21 days and with new travel restrictions for unvaccinated people, it became clear that I needed the jab to continue my studies uninterrupted. At first, I was very clear with my friends and family that I would not get the vaccine. Despite its short rollout time, I did think it was safe, but I didn't think I needed protection from a disease with a very low mortality rate. I never got the flu shot, so why would I need this? It didn't make sense to have it, but after listening to months of English propaganda, I began to think otherwise. I fell into a deep depression from the restrictions and lockdowns and gave in. The UK was imprisoned for a year before the government released the vaccine, right in time for our fatigued and desperate population to roll up their sleeves.